Everyone, very good morning. A warm welcome to this webinar series by Glenmore Global Resources. So today we have a very focused discussion that is on assessments. And therefore, without taking too much time, I will give a very brief intro to Glenmore Global Resources. Glenmore is a Sri Lankan organization with two strategic partnerships with two international giants, Harrison's Assessments and Workplace Options. Harrison Assessment is a well-known psychometric assessment provider, and it is used in 61 countries in 38 languages and over 2.5 million people assessed. If you go to Glenmore website, Glenmore Global Resources website, that is glenmore.lk, and click on Harrison icon, which is in the top right of the front page. You can see that if you go to glenmore.lk website. Then you will get connected with Glenmore Harrison site with all the information you need, all the test reports and everything you need to know about Harrison. So the other global partner of Glenmore is Workplace Options, WPO USA. WPO is the world's largest privately owned and independent provider of integrated employee well-being solutions. It's 65 million employees, 100,000 organizations in over 200 countries and territories across the globe, including Sri Lanka. So Glenmore represents the Sri Lankan operation. Glenmore provides end-to-end HR solutions, including consultancy services. Please visit glenmore.lk for more details. You will find out all the services that Glenmore offers in the website. So colleagues, today's session is take the myth out of assessments and build leadership pipeline. Unfortunately, Dr. Shubhaka Gajula will not be able to join with us today due to an unavoidable medical emergency of an immediate family member. So please apologize for this. And this happened a few hours before. However, we are fortunate to have Shalini Trivedi, Head of Business Development of Harrison's Assessments, India. Many thanks to Dr. Gajula for introducing Shalini to us. This is the 7th webinar Glenmore conducts for you. This is an extended version of what we did last week with Jimmy Ong of Omniweave Consulting, Malaysia. If you have any questions, please use the chat box below as we mute the microphones, or you can text to our mobile number 0768 031 031. I'll read it again, 0768 031 031, or you can mail to info@glenmore.lk, info@glenmore.lk. Managing talent in an optimum manner is extremely crucial for any organization, especially with the challenging situation we are in. We talked about what organizations look for nowadays in employees, and we talked about talent assessments. Today, we'll do a deep dive into those assessments, psychometric assessments especially. So for today's topic, take the myth out of assessments and build leadership pipeline. We have Shalini Trivedi, Head of Business Development of Harrison's Assessments India. She comes with over 20 years of experience in IT and assessment industry, backed by a master's in human resources. Hi Shalini, very good morning. Welcome to the session. Thank you very much for joining with us with a very short notice. It's a great privilege to have you here from Harrison's. Hi Shalini.
Thank you, Prabhash, for such a great introduction, and I'm really glad that I'm getting connected with all of you today, and it is my pleasure to do this and take you through Harrison Assessments tool. So so can I would like to share my screen to.
Yeah, Shalini. Yes, please. Yeah. At the same time, so Shalini, so today's discussion is all about assessments, or especially the psychometric assessments, and with a special focus on Harrison. So how can we use this effectively to build the talent pipeline? That's what we would like to listen to you, want to get from you. So before we get into more details about these Harrison's assessments or assessments, shall we talk about some of the myths about those, Shalini? There are certain myths about these assessments.
Absolutely. We'll definitely talk about that. And let me, good morning, everyone. And I am really glad that you all made it on a Sunday morning. to explore about the assessments and understand more about how it can bring value to the organization, to build talent and to build leadership pipeline. So well, as you rightly said, Prabhash, that there are many myths attached to assessments, be it any assessments, and a few of these myths are that you would relate to, that candidates, when you conduct an assessment, they can fake it. A lot of people think that it is easy to fake an assessment. You know, you cannot, I'm sure a lot of people would have this thing in mind, that you cannot assure an ROI. So that's also one of the myths that we have about the assessments. Assessments cannot beat my intuition. So when we have experienced people, and you usually have this that assessment. I have so much of experience of interviewing people and knowing and understanding the behavior, that how can a simple assessment tool which can be which is conducted in 30 minutes can beat my intuition. So that's also one of the myths that we have. And people need to be assessed multiple times, and it would put off candidates. So that's also one of the myths that you would hear about a lot about around the assessments. Now, so what is more important to understand is that what exactly is what we are looking at, what is, as an organization, our objective is, and what are the aspects do I want to measure. Now, talking about this, let me just give you a little background about Harrison assessments. And it is also important to, what is important here to recognize is that every individual is unique, and avoid the common practice of categorizing people. So we generally try to categorize people as this personality type or a style, this personality style that the person has. So it is very important to generalize, not generalize people. And so what Harrison assessment brings is the enjoyment. Harrison assessment is a tool that measures the enjoyment and the tendencies for the factors and behavior traits that predictively impact performance. I will tell you how in our in further conversation. Now, this is where the Harrison assessment has its application. Harrison has its application in the entire employee life cycle, starting from talent acquisition to talent development, employee engagement, succession planning within the organization, all of it. So the moment you hire a person to their to even career planning and succession planning within the organization, everywhere this has an application, and it can give you a lot of insight about any human behavior. Here are certain unique features and unique capabilities about Harrison assessments. So, you can see Harrison has a smart questionnaire. I will go a little deep dive into every aspect of the unique capabilities. But here it is, so these are all 8 mentioned. You can see that on my screen. One is the SMART questionnaire. Harrison uses a SMART questionnaire. We have a range of 175 traits that Harrison can assess in merely 20 minutes. Harrison has a consistency and authenticate results. So there is a consistency mechanism which is inbuilt in the tool. The tool is based on enjoyment performance theory. There is another theory that Harrison is based on, which is called paradox theory. So I will talk about this in the further slides. So these are, the 8 unique features about Harrison. Harrison does benchmarking. Harrison has a quantitative critical thinking assessment also, which is a cognitive assessment. Other than the behavioral assessment, Harrison conducts quantitative critical thinking, which analyzes logical reasoning, verbal abilities, and numerical abilities. about the decision analytics JSF job criteria. We will talk about this again a little later. Now, okay, so the first unique feature that we spoke about, the SMART questionnaire. Harrison has a comprehensive set of job success factors, which it assesses in the 20 to 30 minutes. There is a forced ranking system that Harrison follows. We do not have any questions or answers. The forced ranking system reveals genuine priorities and prevent exaggerated self-rating. So it's a self-rated system when an individual is ranking himself, and when he is ranking, it brings out the genuine priorities about a person, because there are many correlations within the statements that prevents exaggeration out of it. There are three layers of authenticity and reliability that are there. So there are equally attractive positive statements. So when a person or when an assessee takes the assessment, there are many statements that they have to rank in order of their preference. And you would find there are many equally attractive positive statements that they are ranking, which makes it difficult to make one choice as best. The focus is on the preferences and achieving mutual benefit, thus removes the incentive to deceive. There are no negative questions. Counterproductive traits are identified through unknown paradoxical relationship. So since there are many statements and they are due to their responses and their choice of statements, it is identified there are many paradoxical relationships within those statements, and thus it impacts and it identifies what are the traits that a human or that the assessee has a high preference on. There's a technological consistency check, makes thousands of cross references to identify inconsistency. So there is a consistency mechanism in the tool inbuilt to find out that if there are no inconsistencies, and inconsistencies can be for many reasons. It can be that a person is trying to randomly take the assessment, or the person may be trying to give an expected answer where there are exaggerations which are not nullified, or there are understanding issues. So there could be many reasons of inconsistency. So this technology of consistency check makes cross references which identifies the inconsistencies which can be brought into the tool. Now, Harrison offers, as I mentioned, there are many solutions, and it has its application in the entire employee life cycle. Now, let me start with the recruitment solution that Harrison offers. So there are two factors that everybody would agree where, there are two factors that we look at when we look at performance and when we look at a right talent, bringing in a right talent to the organization. So 50% of it is eligibility. And that is something which is implemented by all the organization, which are the factors like experience, training, education level, or maybe some certification. So those are all eligibility factors which are tangible, which you can see in the certificates, where you can see what are the credentials of a person. So those are all eligibility factors which contribute only 50% of the person's success in a particular job. Now, when we have to look at overall success or overall predictability of a success of a person, it becomes very important to see how suitable also the person is. Eligibility can only decide and define what the person can do or what is the person can perform. But suitability identifies the will the person perform. Can the person perform is eligibility, but will the person perform is suitability. A poor suitability can sub-optimize the performance. Now, what is suitability? Suitability means the passion for the job. What is my interest? What are the interests that the individual has? What are the work preferences? You know, I may prefer to do something else, but I have some other skills maybe. So does that match? Does my work preferences match my skills? What are interpersonal skills? What are the interpersonal skills of an individual? The career expectations, behavioral competencies, and behavior, very important, the behavior under stress. This is what everything that is covered under the suitability is what Harrison does measure and gives you an overall suitability assessment, which is highly predictive of a success of a person in a particular job role. These are the three different reports that Harrison has. These are three different analyses that Harrison offers for recruitment, which are used to screen, which are as work as an enabler to find the right fit. The most important report is called Job Success Analysis. Now, one of the unique features that we spoke about is the Job Success Analysis. The Job Success Analysis is basically, a formula. So there is a job success formula that Harrison uses and has more than 6,500 job success formulas already developed, which are prevalent in any industry for any kind of a job role. So Harrison has a formula for each kind of a job role, even the niche job roles, or any job roles which are evolving with new times. Harrison has a success formula which has been developed with various researchers. And the success formula is highly predictive of a success of a person in a particular job role. Now, how this formula is being developed is this formula really means that what are the success factors for a particular job role. Now, you would agree that there are certain job roles where there are certain behavioral expectations which may be common, but there are certain job roles where we have different behavioral expectations. You know, as somebody who is handling the finance, we may have different expectations than somebody who is managing operations, even from a behavioral perspective. So Harrison measures all which are relevant to predict performance of a person in a particular job role. Harrison also gives an interview guide along with the job success analysis, which becomes an enabler to conduct a behavioral interview. It gives all the questions which relate to that person to further validate the analysis or the output that you receive in the job success analysis. So it's an enabler, it's a guide for an interviewer who is conducting a behavioral interview. There is another report which is optional, which is called How to Attract the Candidate. This provides the recruiter with key information necessary to convince a top applicant. Because when we are fetching for top talent, they also have enough options outside. So it identifies the applicant's most important work values and explain how to describe the job in most attractive terms and highlight essential and important factors to consider. So these are all recruitment reports that we spoke about. Now, let's come to employee development. As we said that it has its application everywhere. Now, when we talk of development, as such, we can choose more wisely and differently if we have framework to make those different behavioral choices. So Harrison assessments process allows us to leverage our personal development and growth. These are certain reports which are used for development, which is one, and a few of them are called paradox graph. This is one of the technologies that Harrison is based on. I will explain this particular report up a little further. So this is one of the report called paradox graph. Then there are engagement and retention analysis that also Harrison can bring out. Now, talking of paradox graph, so this particular report actually brings out, they show the dynamic relation of 12 paradoxical pairs of a trait in an area of interpersonal achievement and leadership. This also brings out the stress behavior of a person in a situation where there is wherever there is stress arises, and how a person would naturally behave and how a person can behave in a stressful situation. Engagement and retention analysis provides an overview on how to increase engagement through understanding employees' expectation and related organizational behavior. This gives a lot of insight about what an individual wants, what are the highest wants, and how we can have a mutual fulfillment by understanding their wants and having a conversation on further creating a fulfillment within the organization and an employee. Traits and definition report show all the traits and the traits and definition in order of individual score. The traits categories are traits, task preferences, work environmental preferences, interests, engagements, and retention factor, behavioral competencies. We spoke about the suitability factors. This is one of the mother reports of Harrison, where the entire raw data is being displayed. Now, let me talk about a little theoretical background about Harrison assessments. I think you must be wondering that what Harrison assessments really measures. Now, Harrison assessment, as we spoke, that Harrison assessment is a tool that measures our preferences, our behavioral tendencies and our preferences to what we like to do and what we do not like to do. Now, these preferences, unlike any other personality type tool, Harrison measures behaviors, our tendencies, our behaviors, our task preferences, our interests. And when we know what is a certain behavior which may impact us, it is easy also to develop that. And it is also easy to adapt to change. Now, one of the theories that Harrison is based on is called enjoyment performance theory. Enjoyment performance theory, if you look at it, it's a four-stage cycle. There are four stages of this cycle. The first stage is called enjoy. Now, each one of us would relate to it, that something that when we enjoy, we like doing something, we often want to repeat that. That's the second stage, where we often want to repeat what we enjoy. And when we repeat something so often, just by the virtue of repetition, we get better at it. We improve that, what we enjoy. And when we improve something that we do so repetitively and we enjoy so much, we often also get positive feedback. This positive feedback can be external as well as internal, where we feel satisfied about the work that we do. And when we get this positive feedback and a satisfaction within, it further leads back to enjoyment. And that is where the circle joins back. So this is where the loop joins back. This is where the loop ends. And before we know it, these become our highest preferences. They are the things that actually define us. When we have a very high preference on something, these are the things that start defining us. So this is what the enjoyment performance theory is, that we enjoy, we repeat, improve, get feedback, and we again enjoy it all the more, which leads to further enjoyment of the behavior. Now, if you look at it conversely, if you look at it the opposite way, Imagine there is something that we do not enjoy. And when we do not enjoy something, the second stage is that we try to avoid or procrastinate. Since we do not like it so much, we often try that if it is possible, let's avoid it, or rather have somebody else do it for us. And when we avoid something, there is less improvement. There is less improvement. There is less working on it, and we do not get better at that, which would lead to negative feedback or maybe not receiving any flattering feedbacks. And that further leads back to not enjoying it, because there is no internal satisfaction also. And because of the negative feedback, it leads us to further non-enjoyment. So before we know this, this is a cycle that repeats by itself. And we these things which we do not enjoy become less of our preferences. They are actually never on our radar and at the lowest level of our preferences. This is what the enjoyment performance theory is, and this very well relates to Harrison because this is the theory that it is based upon. It measures our preferences and our tendencies, which identifies what we naturally like to do, is indicates what we can be best at. Now, the benefits of understanding enjoyment performance theory as it relates to employees. Work satisfaction and job performance is increased. Now, we just spoke about this. Whenever we have enjoyment on doing something, there is always a better satisfaction. We have a work satisfaction and the job performance also increases. And is increased the more required tasks are enjoyed by the employee. And engagement is the result of meeting mutual expectations, the expectations of an employee and the organization. Retention is increased by improving job fit. Now, the second theory that we were talking about, which is a paradox theory, which is one of the development analysis and the development reports. I would also like to mention that at the leadership level, this is one technology and one report which is also used for leadership hiring. This helps us understand the paradox theory and understanding the paradoxical reports. There are 12 paradoxes. Now, let me explain by what paradox really means here to the context of Harrison. In a general layman understanding, a paradox means two opposite things or two opposite beliefs. However, to the context of Harrison, it means two things that seemingly look opposite or contradictory are actually in reality synergistic and interdependent. There is interdependence between those two paradoxical traits, which makes it a real strength. Now, what are the key principles of the paradox theory? A single strong trait in itself is not necessarily a genuine strength. As just we spoke about this, that a single trait without being complemented by the paradoxical trait can actually look very strong, but actually can become a derailer if it is not complemented well with the opposite trait. So, a single strong trait in itself is not necessarily a genuine strength. It may be a significant weakness rather. Now, I can give you an example. So, a strong frankness without strongly diplomatic becomes bluntness. This is one of the paradoxes, which is called communication. There are 12 paradoxes as we spoke about. One of it is called communication, that how we communicate with others. It's a combination of two paradoxical traits. Frankness, where how we put across things and how we are forthrightly putting across things, straight and forthright. And the other complementing trait is diplomatic, that how we are we using tactfulness? Are we being tactful in putting across things frankly. It's a combination of both. And when we talk about something which is very strong, like for example, if we are a person who's very frank, can actually be come across as blunt in case if he's not using the diplomacy while putting across something frankly. So that is what one of the examples of paradoxical traits. And there are such 12 paradoxes, which gives you a deep understanding about human behavior in context to their interpersonal relationship, their leadership, and their achievements. The two paradoxical traits which are synergistic and they are eliminate the potential weakness of each trait. Strong frankness combined with strong diplomacy eliminates bluntness and also evasiveness. So this is about the paradoxical theory. So these are the two theories that Harrison is based on. And I would like to mention that paradox is one of the theories that Harrison is one of the most favored tool because of its paradox technology. Paradox technology was brought into the assessment industry by Harrison Assessments. This technology, we have won many awards for bringing this technology and using this technology into the assessment industry. Now, I'm sure you would have a lot of questions around the reliability of the tool, the reliability and the measurement scale. So the reliability and the measurement trait factors, the reliability percentage indicates how consistent. So there is a reliability percentage given when you pull out a report or generate a report of each individual. There is a reliability percentage also which comes out, which indicates how consistent the person was in stack ranking their responses. When the reliability percentage is above 80%, it gives us confidence that the responses are accurate and in terms of the person's preferences and tendencies. Now that is the threshold that we have set of 80%, but it may differ. Now this is what you can look at, this is what Harrison recommends. A reliability of 100% means perfectly consistent. So you can actually see a lot of people having 100% consistency, which means perfectly consistent. 85% is optional minimum for management. So what we set as a threshold is 85%. When there is a management person or anybody who is a supervisory or a manager above level, should actually have a consistency of minimum 80%, 85%. And 80% is the minimum for all jobs, all other jobs. And when you see any reliability score of less than 80%, which you may not be able to see in the report, you can see it to our system or our dashboard. Because we do not recommend generating a report when the consistency is below 80%. So in case if the consistency is below 80%, we ask for a repeat of a questionnaire. We ask the candidate or the employee to take the assessment again. Because the scores or the data which will get represented in case if we generate a report may not be reliable. And if it is a 0% consistency, means that the person has randomly taken the assessment. Now, how we can administer the Harrison tool, usually you must have seen that a lot of times, and also to reduce the reliability results, the failed reliability results, is there is a guideline that goes along with the questionnaire to every individual, which also which also gives the guidelines that there are no right or wrong answers. But when we are administering it, we strongly recommend that it should not be called as a personality or a psychological tool. Avoid the term as test. Call it a work preference questionnaire. Harrison calls it a work preference inventory, and tell them to take their time and avoid interruptions. So these are the guidelines that we give them to avoid any kind of inconsistency. So I am, I am actually, the presentation is over. I would like to put it over to all of you to have any questions or would like to ask any questions relating to this, to the tool, to what it does, what it measures, and how it can benefit the organization. Anything that you, over to you, Prabhash.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shalini. So let's now we'll move on to some of the questions that we have received. The first question is from Ramesh Pereira, which we have received. What is the main difference between an assessment and an evaluation?
Okay.
Assessment
So,
and evaluation.
yeah, sure. So, an assessment and an evaluation. See, these are, I think, I will call it only as labels.
Yeah.
What we have labeled them as. To the context of the industry, yes, assessments are the ones where we use uh, to assess, to assess a human behavior scientifically. In evaluation in our industry, what we call is that when there is a human intervention where we are trying to evaluate somebody on their, we are trying to evaluate basis their, basis our own perceptions or basis our own, understanding about as a, as a having a new human intervention. So that's the only difference, but I would say that these are all labels. You may call this as evaluation or you may call that as assessment. So these are just labels that we call it. But to the context of Harrison, assessments are where we are scientifically identifying and not not judging anybody by their responses, or there are no human intervention where based on my experiences I am trying to evaluate somebody. Because you would agree to that, that when I am evaluating somebody, I would do it, so I'm not nullifying the fact that it is, with your experience somebody can evaluate. But the best way, or the best way to measure and to understand the right talent or to understand the right behavior is the mix of both, where we are using the contemporary way of evaluating also, and also conducting these assessments to understand what a person may not be able to may not be able to put across in those 30 minutes of interview, or you may not be able to evaluate as at the individual level in those 30 minutes of interview.
Thank you, Shalini. And I would like to hear a little bit more on this paradox theory which you explained, Shalini. Say now you took the communication, like say, for example, you talked about two areas like frankness and the diplomacy, right?
Yeah.
So if you relate it to this part of the world, actually, right? Sometimes we hear some politicians, without naming anybody, but sometimes they might be telling the truth but may not be at the right place. So the frankness could be there, but the diplomacy might not be there. So likewise, and then again, you mentioned about under pressure, how do they behave? So can you elaborate a little bit more on that part? Because it's very clear, like you have two factors like the frankness and diplomacy in communication, but then a person might, like under normal circumstances, a person might fall into one segment, but
Yeah.
under pressure, can we see it in Harrison's? Okay,
Yes.
if you are pressurized, so then how his or her behavior changes.
Sure, Prabhash. It's
Yeah.
a very relevant question, and so let me try and explain. So this is one of the paradox that we were talking about called communication. Now, communication, there are main two traits which are paradoxical in nature, which is frank, where we put across something straightforward, and diplomatic is a paradoxical trait where when we look at it, you would agree that they both look they look opposite to each other. But they are synergistic. Now I'll tell you how. When somebody who's very high on frankness, imagine a situation where somebody who's very, very high on frankness and also equally high on diplomatic, the person would be able to deal with variety of situations in a certain certain situation of communicating. Now there could be many there are many difficult conversations a lot of time that we have to manage as leaders or as managers. And at that time, when when somebody chooses only to be frank, to put across something and not being diplomatic, it can come across as being blunt. Similarly, if somebody who's being very diplomatic, there could be a scenario where there is somebody who's very diplomatic and but very low on frank, can actually become evasive, because what can happen in that scenario is that I'm being so diplomatic and being so tactful that I'm not able to put across what I really want to communicate. So both the situations, there is an imbalance. There is an imbalance in a scenario where I may be able to deal with a lot of situations with my frankness, but wherever it requires diplomacy, I may fail. I may come across as blunt. Similarly, with my diplomacy, I may have a great interpersonal relationship with others, but it may affect when I have to actually get certain things done, or I have to there is something that I want to communicate, but I am not able to, and I am just not being forthright in communicating that. Now I will now what may happen, we spoke about the stress behavior. What may happen in case if there is a imbalance? Now, when there is a high balance, means that both are high. Frankness and diplomacy both are high. Where there is a high balance, there is you can deal with variety of situations. But whenever there is an imbalance, any of it is being high and the other being low, there could be a situation where there is a stress that would arise. Now, I'll give you an example. Maybe somebody in our work culture, where I have an important meeting, and a person I have in my team who is very, very frank and very and comes across as being blunt. I give a feedback that, okay, so hold on, and this is a very important meeting. We have people who would be attending this meeting are very critical. So if there is anything, I would request you to put it across politely in case if there is anything that you want to share. Now, what would happen in such a scenario? Now imagine, if I have a very high preference on only one thing, let's say being high on frank and very low on diplomacy, what generally happen if I have a very high preference on one paradoxical trait? I would generally, or I would mostly demonize the other. I would demonize the other. Being a frank person, I would always think that, would you want me to lie? I'm being honest. These are the things that I would feel. And when I'm stopped doing that, what would happen? I would withdraw myself. That does not mean that I would get balanced. I would start withdrawing myself. And when I withdraw myself, I would behave the opposite of what I am. I am. I would suddenly become evasive. I would say that, okay, I will withdraw myself. That does not mean that I will become diplomatic. I will not become diplomatic. I will become evasive. So that is the flight or a fly or a fight situation that I get into when I get into stress. There is a certain amount of stress that arises when we are out of balance. And when we are out of balance, that stress can cause us behave in a way which we normally are not. You would have also noticed people a lot of times who are very, very diplomatic, and suddenly there would be something where they would come across as extremely blunt. So that's not their natural choice. That is something which is their which is their stress behavior, which arises only under stress.
Yeah, if you get a paradox report, I think this is very clearly visible in the report.
Absolutely. There are many
Yes.
such paradoxes which talks about our opinions in interpersonal, where how certain we are and how open and reflective we are. So similarly, so in total, there are 12 paradoxes, focuses on interpersonal relationship, achievement, and leadership. So it gives you a lot of insight about how a person, how balanced a person is in interpersonal relationships, or how what kind of an achiever a person is, or what is the leadership, their leadership skills.
And Shalini, something related to what we are discussing right now. Lalit has asked, what do you exactly mean by diplomatic, by being diplomatic or diplomacy? What does it mean? Just to clarify.
Diplomat, yes,
Yeah.
diplomacy means being tactful in communicating what you want to communicate.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
being tactful,
So,
it does not mean, it does not mean that beating around the bush. It does not mean what you're sugarcoating something, but not coming across as what you really want to communicate, but being tactful.
yeah, thanks. Thank you, Ajit, for your question. There's a question. How did you consider cultural differences? Uh, that's a very good question because we are in this Asian part of the region, and sometimes certain assessments are based on like mostly on West. So how do you see these cultural differences?
Okay, so there are, so there are many, so Harrison does researches across the globe. And when we are conducting an assessment, only from a perspective of, from a perspective of a job, there could be different jobs, a same title can have a different, different job requirements. So to nullify that, Harrison takes the job description and the KPI also from the organization to understand a
Hmm.
little deeper into what are the job expectations. Whereas their responses are getting captured, it does not capture anything from the perspective of the country, from the perspective of even this even the sex of a person, whether it's a female or a male, or what culture that person is belongs from. So that those are the things that does not get captured. So which are since we are global, we have a global preference. Those are the things which especially US and the Europe countries are very particular about. So when you talk about that, it does not capture anything. But from a job success formula, we capture things what are required for a certain job level, to understand and to get a deeper view of what is the formula that we need to use based on the job requirement.
Okay, thank you, Shalini. Um, and then Dilrukshi has a question she has forwarded us. It has several parts of that. So during an interview of 30 minutes, how can you assess an individual's behavioral strengths? Please share some examples. Shall I read out
Okay.
the next two parts also, or shall we go one by one?
We can go one by one. So
Okay,
how a
right.
person, how we can analyze in 30 minutes. So that's the beauty of the tool. There are, we spoke about this. I spoke about this in my, earlier in my presentation, that there are cross references which happen, and there is seen a paradoxical relationship also within the statement. So based on the statements, all there is a mathematical calculation behind that, which relates to many traits. this 30 minutes assessment, which actually those statements and those the correlation and the cross references which we have in the different in the responses that we capture, it is actually equivalent to 8,000 plus questions when you ask in an assessment center. So this, and Harrison assesses the highest range of behaviors, which is 175, and those behaviors and then further looked upon based on, what is the definition of the competency that we are looking at, and then we see from that perspective. So it can, there are various, those statements, since there are, there are cost references, that those statements relate to many traits, and multiple traits relate to many statements.
Second part of the question is, when the predictions are not 100% accurate, then how does a predictive insight apply correctly? Therefore, who has to bear the cost of a wrong prediction? Is it employer or interviewer? Like if done by an outsider. Sometimes the interviews are conducted by outside parties or the outsourced organizations. So these are about the physical interviews.
Yeah. So, well, that is the beauty. That's what where we are trying to look at the overall fitment. So when we talk about the assessment tools, they become your enablers to identify what you may be missing during an interview. Maybe also during a behavioral interview, what you may be missing. This is something which enables us. This gives us an overall perspective. And now, so, and as I said that, when we look at it from a perspective or from a lens of a job, when we look at their behaviors or their traits from a lens of a job, that is where it becomes highly predictive of a success. So Harrison, predictability is also, the reliability is 85% above. But again, we would say that it is very important to actually use this as an enabler, to validate and to validate further and to probe further to understand all the aspects which are relevant to the context of the job that you are hiring for.
Last part of the question, I think if somebody has recruited somebody previous, so can we still groom an employee in the pipeline to come up to the right fit? If yes, or if no, please give some examples. It's a grooming, the pipeline building. If you have recruited somebody, maybe she may be asking like, okay, wrong person, but how do we develop the person? What
Yeah,
are the
sure.
stages? I think,
Of
yes.
course. So it is, when we do a hiring and we realize later that there is something which needs to, with where, needs attention, or is an area that you would like the person to develop. Yes, of course, in case if you have hired somebody and it is, you can develop that person for, to have that conversation. It is very important that what are your expectations, and to make the person understand. See, behaviors cannot change overnight. It's a long process. It's a long process where, when we use it for development, the first and the foremost thing is to create an awareness, to make the person understand that what are our behaviors, and what are our strengths, what are the areas that may be not our strengths. And then after creating that awareness, and this, uh, then accepting plays a very important role. That, is the person able to accept um, what is what is seen? And, because we often are not able to see ourselves, what may be, from a behavioral perspective, what may be our strengths and what may be our areas which may hinder our performance. And if that is the case, then it is very important to accept. First, that's the second stage. And the third is the adaptability, that the person is the person willing to change? Is the person ready to adapt to change? So definitely you can show a development path to a person, but it all depends upon the conversation to understand that whether the person has the willingness to change. To show the path is also is very very important. You definitely, we can develop people, if we can build that, if there is a need for development, you can build a person and have a person, and from a hiring perspective also, as I said, that it is very important to probe and then see it from a context of the role. If you feel that there are certain things which can be developed later and it will be easy to develop, you can hire that person.
And adding on to what you said, I think, Shalini, now Harrison's will also support with some of the reports also for the development purposes. No?
Yes.
Right.
There are many reports which relate to,
Yes.
we spoke about engagement and retention, which
Yes.
gives us a lot of insight about how we can engage with people, how we can understand their wants, and how we can have a mutual fulfillment, where both their wants of an organization and employee is being met. Which there are a lot of policies which a lot of our clients actually develop based on the engagement and retention. We also have a group report available which can actually give you an analysis on engagement and retention at the organizational level or maybe at a team level.
Yeah. You can find out, like, if somebody is interested in, you can go to glenmore.lk website, and then it's in your top right hand side. Harrison's icon is there, logo is there. So when you click it, you will go to Glenmore Harrison's website. So in there you can find out all of these reports. Like, if you're interested in getting, you can see the actual reports, sample reports that you would like to see how you can utilize these things. So thank you very much, Dilruksha, for the long three questions. And then let's move on to another one. Of course, this is a repetition kind of a thing that we asked from Jimmy Young last time. HR can understand the value of psychometric test, but convincing it to top management is extremely difficult. What should be the HR approach to convince, and how they can show what the ROI, return on investment, is? Like, the HR is aware of these tools, but convincing to the top. How do we do that as HR people?
It's always a challenge. It's always
Yes.
a challenge for all of us. And, I think the best way to do it, because you cannot show, an ROI that moment. It can be seen with, in a span of time. It cannot be seen immediate. But what is important, for us is to give that experience. We generally when there are other stakeholders, we generally offer them a hands-on experience on the tool to understand that what are the benefits, what can it, and we also have many case studies available which we can share, which has shown a remarkable difference in people who were hired, and there were certain people, who were hired based on conducting the assessments. So this also, this is an enabler which makes them identify out of the top people from the perspective of eligibility. When they see that, okay, these are the people who are the highly suitable from a behavioral perspective, it substantially reduces the administrative time also of doing something manually. But yeah, having said that, this cannot be tangibly proven at right at that moment. So you have to give it some time to do an analysis and conduct a reassessment for those people whom you have whom you have developed, or whom you have conducted a development intervention.
Okay, Shalini. Pradeep, thanks for the question. So, what are the methods or tools which you can suggest to have the balance in different paradoxes? I'll repeat it again. What are the methods or tools which you can suggest to have the balance in different paradoxes?
Balancing different
Yeah.
paradoxes. Okay, so again, I would like to mention here that it is a norm to have at least 5 to 9 paradoxes being out of balance. We have not seen anybody being perfectly balanced on all 12 paradoxes. That's humanly not possible. What is important to see first of all is that's the first step, that we see that to the context of the organization and to the context of the role, that what are the paradoxes where there is a requirement of improvement, where it is posing to be a hindrance. What are the paradoxical traits which are posing to be a hindrance, and it can really have an impact. We do not suggest working on more than 2 behaviors at any given point. Now, the tool that Harrison offers is, once you identify that what are the traits that you would like to, a person would like to change, or what are the paradoxical traits that he would like to develop, we can actually have an automated report which gives a step-by-step plan to work on that behavior, to create that balance. Something which is high is a good, it so we do not say that to create that balance, bring the high low. So it is always bringing the low up, the bringing the low high. So what is the trait that we want to develop is, we can identify together, and then we can work on a plan. So Harrison has a tool, as a tool, has a development by trait report for every trait available in the paradoxical traits. And
Okay.
it has a step by step plan also how to develop that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great report. Yeah. Okay. Now, Lalit Manage, your question: how do top performers perform under pressure or under stress? What are the characteristics of them? The question is, how do top performers perform under pressure?
Uh, how do top performers perform under pressure? See, top performers, I would say, can perform in both the scenarios. Whether there is pressure, if there are top performers, and if they have a high self motivation, a very high self motivation, they would perform uh, either ways. Now, it is important to see actually if there are things which relate to a lot of pressure. Then Harrison also assesses what is the pressure tolerance of an
Yeah.
individual. So that is more important to see that how much a person can handle pressure if the job requires that. So that's more important, and then see that whether the person has the other behaviors that the person is exhibiting or not. But if the job requires a lot of pressure, then it is more important to look at whether the person can handle the pressure or not.
Mm.
Can be a high performer, can but a lot of times a high performer may not be able to handle a lot of pressure. So looking at how they can handle the pressure is more important then, if the job requires that.
Okay. The next one, could you please give some approximate cost indication for these psychometric tests, especially referring to Harrison's, I suppose? Uh, Approximate cost indication about, because there could be like different reports you can take. So rough cost indication. Are these too expensive or?
No, it is. It is. In fact, we have the pricing in Sri Lanka or in India for a developing country. So the pricing is not expensive. It is at par with other tools, which are global tools. I'm talking about, and highly affordable. So, but it ranges. I mean, so I will have to see in the Sri Lankan currency. But if you understand Indian currency, it
Yeah,
is anywhere between, it is anywhere about 7,000 for any development intervention. And for a recruitment intervention, it is anywhere between, 2,000 to 2,500.
yeah, yeah. But you can take maybe if somebody wants maybe a few reports, so then the cost would go down. But it's for the full package or
Yes, that's no, this is I'm telling you about only, I'm talking about the shelf price.
yeah,
The more the volume is, the lesser the price is.
yeah, yeah. And
But
if
I
somebody's
would say that this is very broad, because it
yes,
all depends what is the intervention. Even in development, there are 7 different analysis that we recommend and we offer. So it all depends what is the organization finally decides upon. So we can, that is a discussion that we can, I think,
yeah,
have offline, if anybody is interested in terms
yeah,
of, but yeah, it is the costing which is there is for a developing country, so it is
yeah.
quite, as per the standards of a developing country.
Yeah, Shalini, actually, since Glenmore represents in Sri Lanka, so that the Glenmore team should be able to share if somebody's interested in
Yes.
send them a mail, so that they should be able to share with you the Sri Lankan prices also. Right. So, and then we'll take the last two questions. One is different psychometric tests serve different purposes. Uh, how can we study some of the Harrison's reports further? Thanks,
Yeah.
Ruangi, for your question. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
How can we
Okay.
study these
Yes,
reports?
you would require, you can study the Harrison reports, but every tool work differently and the analysis are different. So to use, some of our reports, you do not require certification. To use certain reports like Paradox, it requires certification. So Harrison provides online certifications. These are available. You can do it from anywhere across the globe, and these are online available. You can certify yourself, and there are 2 levels of certification that Harrison offers: level 1 and level 2. Level 1 is covers the entire application and the interpretation of all the reports that Harrison offers. And level 2 is a debriefing certificate. It's a coaching and a debriefing certificate where it certifies you as a certified, it gives you a certificate as a certified coach and a debriefer of Harrison assessments. You can use that certificate. It is important to get that certification if you are coaching people for
Yeah,
development.
and,
But if
and,
you're
and but
using it for recruitment, you can simply do only level 1.
yes, and that is for you to like interpret and all that. But if you want to
Yes.
see, okay, what the reports are available, of course, as I mentioned previously, so you can go to Harrison's website or through the Glenmore website, you can get into Harrison so that you can check all the reports. Those are available, right? And then we will move on to the last question. Certain psychometric tests are available in the net and are free for individuals. Those are not maybe the customized reports, but still, yeah, the question says certain psychometric tests are available in the net and are free for individuals. How can we do Harrison's assessment to understand it better? Is it free?
You cannot go online to do it, a free assessment, but in case if you have any of this interest, you can definitely get in touch with Prabhash. We can give you a demo. We can give you a demo to get a hands-on experience on the tool, to see how the assessment works, and we can also generate your reports for
Yeah.
further use to understand a little deeper and get reflection of your own self. So that's a hands-on experience that we would be happy to provide you.
Okay. Thank you, Shalini. In the interest of time, so yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Shalini. You have gone into very much of details. So good
Thank you so much.
awareness, good awareness on Harrison and its effective usage. So, and especially with a extremely short notice, few hours you had only. So, thank you very much from on behalf of the team Glenmore Global Resources and from us, from the listeners, like for joining this session on psychometric assessments. So, listeners, I think hope you have enjoyed this session. And if you want to know more about Harrison's, please write to Glenmore. So they represent Harrison in Sri Lanka, so they should be able to help you with. So you can write it to info@Glenmore, or you can call them and ask any more information. So this video, we will share this on glenmore.lk/YouTube and in Facebook and in LinkedIn for those who want to listen it again and for those who have missed it also. Thanks, Shalini, again. And
Thank you so much, Prabhash, and everyone.
and so next week, we will talk about the industrial relations and labor laws, where we make blunders in organizations. And this is a very important topic in these days. So you could be an employer or could be an employee. So you will meet Mr. Leela Ratna Obadage Leela Ratna, former Commissioner of Labor, and he's an honorable member of the Industrial Court and an attorney at law, well qualified and a well respected gentleman in the labor field. So this will be in English and in Sinhala mixed language. Please write to us if you have any questions related to this area, either in Sinhalese or in English. So we will share this information, all the details in Glenmore Global Resources Facebook page, YouTube, and in LinkedIn. So please get registered. So you will meet Mr. Leela Ratna Obadage, former Commissioner of Labor, Honorable Member of Industrial Court, and Attorney at Law next week. So thank you. Thank you very much for joining with us and have a pleasant day. Thanks. Stay safe. Thank you.